Look at your hand right now. Whatever shade it is, that color didn't just happen. It's not random. It's not a coincidence. That skin tone is the result of one of the longest, most dramatic survival stories in the entire history of our species. The full answer involves vitamin D, cancer, folate destruction, ancient Africa, and a group of farmers who accidentally rewired human evolution without even knowing it. Every single piece of that puzzle connects directly to the color you're looking at right now. But here's the part that stops most people cold. Every single one of your ancestors, no matter where you're from today, had dark skin. Not most of them, not the majority. Every single one. Around 300,000 years ago, when Homo sapiens first appeared, the entire species was dark-skinned. There were no light-skinned populations anywhere on the planet. So at some point, something changed. Something so powerful, it physically reshaped entire populations across multiple continents. If that already blew your mind, trust me, we're just getting started. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling me if you've ever wondered where human skin color actually came from, and whether you ever thought about where it actually came from, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. This is about to change everything. Most people never really think about their skin. They moisturize it, they protect it from the sun on a good day, and they move on. It's just the surface, right? Just the outside layer, just packaging. But that way of thinking is one of the biggest misunderstandings about your own body, because skin is not packaging. Skin is your largest organ, and it is working every single second of your life, doing dozens of jobs you never even notice or thank it for. One of the most critical jobs it does, arguably one of the most important things keeping you alive right now, is protecting you from UV radiation. The sun fires invisible ultraviolet energy at Earth constantly, and that radiation is genuinely dangerous. When UV light penetrates your skin, it breaks chemical bonds. It damages your DNA directly. And when DNA damage accumulates over time in the wrong cells, it triggers mutations. Those mutations can become cancer. Specifically melanoma, one of the most aggressive and deadly forms of skin cancer that exists. This is where skin color stops being about appearance and starts being about survival. The pigment responsible for your skin tone is called melanin, and melanin is essentially a natural built-in always-on sunscreen. Your body produces it, stores it in your skin cells, and uses it to physically absorb and deflect UV radiation before it can reach the deeper tissue layers where your DNA lives. The more melanin your skin contains, the darker it appears, and the more effectively it shields your genetic code from damage. So in equatorial Africa, under some of the most intense UV radiation on the planet, dark skin wasn't just a physical trait. It was a biological shield, field-tested over hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution. But UV radiation had another weapon, one that worked in silence, and it didn't go after the person already living. It went after the life that hadn't even been born yet. Here's the thing that most people never hear about. UV radiation wasn't only attacking skin cells. It was reaching deeper, moving through the skin and into the bloodstream and destroying something small, invisible, and absolutely critical to human survival, something called folate. You might know it as vitamin B9, something your doctor mentions during a checkup. But in the context of human evolution, folate is so much more than a dietary supplement. Folate is essential for the development of the neural tube in embryos. The neural tube is the very first structure that forms in a developing baby, and it eventually becomes the brain and the spinal cord. In the first few weeks of pregnancy, sometimes before a woman even knows she's pregnant, folate levels determine whether that neural tube closes properly. If it doesn't, the consequences are devastating. Severe developmental abnormalities, neural tube defects, miscarriage, not occasionally. Consistently, predictably. Now imagine a woman with lighter skin living under the relentless African sun with no clothing, no shelter, no sunscreen. UV radiation penetrates deeper through less melanin, reaches the bloodstream faster, and breaks down folate at a much higher rate. Higher folate destruction meant higher rates of failed pregnancies. And in terms of natural selection, fewer surviving offspring means your genetic traits slowly disappear from the population. The evolutionary pressure was brutal, and it was silent. So now there were two completely independent, devastatingly powerful reasons why dark skin was non-negotiable in equatorial Africa. Melanin protected DNA from UV damage, reducing cancer risk. And melanin protected folate in pregnant women, preserving the next generation. Two separate threats, one biological solution, perfected over hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution. Dark skin wasn't just an advantage, it was the answer. But then something shifted, and the same solution that kept humanity alive was about to become a problem. Between 70,000 and 100,000 years ago, something began that would permanently reshape the human species. Small groups of Homo sapiens started moving out of Africa, not in a single dramatic exodus, not in one massive wave. It was slow, generational drift across thousands of years. A group pushes slightly further north, their children push a little further, their grandchildren further still. Generation after generation, barely noticing the change. Until one day the descendants of those original African populations were standing in Europe and Asia under a completely different sky. And that sky changed everything. At higher latitudes, the sun sits at a lower angle in the sky. The UV radiation has to travel through a much thicker layer of atmosphere before it reaches the ground. Winters are long, days are short. The sky is overcast for months at a time. The intensity of UV light that those northern environments received was a fraction of what people experienced near the equator. For populations that had spent hundreds of thousands of years evolving under brutal African sun, this was a completely new world. Here's where the same biology that protected them in Africa started working against them. Dark skin, packed with melanin, is extraordinarily efficient at blocking UV radiation. In Africa, that was survival. In Northern Europe, that was a problem. Because UV light, specifically UVB radiation, is what triggers vitamin D synthesis in your skin. Vitamin D regulates calcium absorption, bone formation, immune function, and cardiovascular health. Without enough of it, children developed rickets, a disease that softens and deforms bones, including the pelvic bones. Deformed pelvic bones in women meant obstructed childbirth. And obstructed childbirth, without modern medicine, meant death for both mother and child. Dark skin in low UV environments wasn't just a disadvantage anymore. It was a generational death sentence, quietly eliminating the families who couldn't adapt fast enough. And evolution, as it always does, began rewriting the code. But the speed at which it happened is something that most people are completely unprepared to hear. For a long time, scientists assumed that the lightening of skin in European populations was a slow, gradual process that unfolded over hundreds of thousands of years as people spread northward. It seemed logical. More time in low UV environments, more pressure to produce vitamin D through the skin slowly gets lighter, clean, simple, steady. Then ancient DNA analysis came along and completely destroyed that assumption. When researchers started sequencing the genomes of early European inhabitants, what they found stopped people in their tracks. The early hunter-gatherers of Europe still had considerably dark skin, and the most striking example of this is a man scientists call the Cheddar Man. He lived approximately 10,000 years ago in what is now Britain, and his DNA revealed something that feels almost impossible to picture today. Dark to medium dark skin, tightly curled hair, and blue eyes. That combination sounds paradoxical to a modern mind conditioned to associate those features with completely different populations. But it was real, it was documented, and it tells us something profound about how recently skin color in Europe actually changed. The extreme light skin tones associated with Northwestern Europeans today spread through the population only within the last 6,000 to 8,000 years. That is less than 3% of the entire history of our species. And the trigger wasn't time, it was food. The Neolithic Revolution, the shift from hunting and gathering to agriculture, collapsed the dietary sources of vitamin D almost overnight in evolutionary terms. Hunter-gatherers ate fatty fish, organ meats, shellfish, all naturally rich in vitamin D. Farmers ate grains. Vitamin D from diet essentially disappeared. Suddenly, populations in Northern Europe were depending almost entirely on what their skin could synthesize from weak, seasonal, often blocked sunlight. Dark skin in that environment became a genuine public health crisis, and because agricultural populations were large and dense, beneficial mutations spread through them dramatically faster than they ever had in small nomadic bands. Evolution didn't just respond, it accelerated. But here's what makes this story even more remarkable. Europe wasn't the only place where this pressure existed, and the solution that emerged elsewhere was built from completely different genetic raw material. One of the most common misconceptions about skin color is that it works like a simple on and off switch, controlled by one gene that you either have or don't have. The reality is far more complex and far more fascinating. Skin pigmentation is a polygenic trait, meaning it's shaped by dozens of different genes working together, influencing how much melanin your body produces, how it's distributed, how it responds to UV exposure. It's not a single dial, it's an entire control panel. And here is where it gets truly remarkable. East Asian populations and European populations both developed lighter skin tones compared to equatorial Africans, both in response to lower UV environments, both driven by the same vitamin D pressure we've been talking about. But when scientists mapped the specific genetic variants responsible, they found something extraordinary. They used different genes to get there, completely different molecular pathways, arriving at the same biological outcome. This is called convergent evolution. And when nature independently reinvents the same solution multiple times from scratch, it's one of the clearest signals science has that a trait carries serious survival weight. Now consider blue eyes, because this is where the story becomes almost impossible to believe. Every single person alive today with blue eyes descends from one individual, one person, one mutation that occurred somewhere near the Black Sea region between 6,000 and 10,000 years ago. Before that moment, every human being on Earth had brown eyes. Every population, every continent, without a single exception. Blue eyes are younger than of hinge, younger than the domestication of the horse, younger than the earliest known writing systems. What we instinctively feel are ancient, defining, almost primordial human characteristics are, on the geological timescale of our species, barely moments old. These traits we treat as deep identity, as fundamental difference, as the basis for entire social hierarchies. Our recent biological experiments still running, which raises a question that cuts straight to the core of everything we've been building toward. Here is the thing that should stop every single person in their tracks. The biological trait that human civilizations have used to build hierarchies, justify slavery, fuel genocide, and divide entire populations for centuries is, at its core, a UV calibration dial. That is what skin color is. It is your ancestors' best estimate of how much sunlight your body needed to block or absorb based on where they lived. Nothing more, nothing less. A finely tuned biological instrument responding to a star. And the mathematics of it are brutally indifferent to any notion of superiority. Lighter skin is not better in absolute terms. Place a light-skinned person under equatorial African sun without protection, and that skin becomes actively dangerous. Folate depleted, DNA damaged, cancer risk climbing. Dark skin is not primitive. It is the original configuration of the human species. It is the default setting, the foundation everything else was built from. If anything, lighter skin is the newer version, the modification, the recent adaptation. The original human looked at the African sun and answered correctly. The greatest irony running through all of this is that the same star drove both directions of change simultaneously. The same sun that pushed equatorial populations toward more melanin pushed northern populations toward less. The sun didn't choose sides, it just kept burning. And somehow we took that completely neutral biological pressure and constructed an entire architecture of prejudice around it. We built a hierarchy out of a vitamin D problem. The algorithm is still running, just with new inputs now. Sunscreen, vitamin D supplements, fortified foods have changed the selective pressures in ways evolution hasn't caught up to yet, which means every shade of skin you see walking through the world today is a living answer to a question asked by a star across hundreds of thousands of years. And every single one of those answers was correct. What's written in your skin is not random, it's memory. Every shade, every tone, every feature you carry is a silent record of every land, every climate, every survival your ancestors walked through across thousands of years. You are not just a person. You are living proof of a journey older than any civilization we've ever known. So tell me, what hit you the hardest? Was it Cheddar Man, dark-skinned with blue eyes, the real origin of skin color, or the way farming changed everything almost overnight? Drop my skin remembers in the comments and tell me which fact completely broke your expectations. And if this spoke to something deep in you, hit that like button. It means more than you know. If you made it this far and felt something, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. The next video is already on your screen. Don't let it wait.